picture, if you will, like the ultimate escape. An 18th century French farmhouse nestled deep in this beautiful Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur region.
Right, just totally idyllic.
Yeah, exactly. You've got these sprawling vineyards, ancient olive groves, and a perimeter that's just so heavily shielded from the paparazzi that you've effectively bought your own private kingdom. It is, I mean, the absolute definition of a sun-drenched safe haven.
Like a literal fortress of privacy.
Right.
Just built to keep the chaos of the outside world completely at bay.
But it's a fortress that completely failed this week. Because the sky over that exact estate turned this terrifying, like bruised orange color. The air just filled with the thick, choking smell of burning pine.
Wow.
And this uncontrollable natural force basically compelled the residents to pack whatever they could carry and flee alongside hundreds of local villagers. Yeah. And that was the reality this week for George and Amal Clooney. So welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to use their evacuation as a window into a much, much larger reality. We're looking at unprecedented European wildfires that are, incredibly, creating their own weather systems.
Yeah, which is just mind-blowing. And they're blinding our predictive technology and really threatening an economic apocalypse in Europe's most famous cultural regions.
Exactly. So we're pulling from real-time disaster monitoring data, air quality forecasts, and economic reports from the heart of France.
Because, I mean, we are looking at a localized celebrity story, sure, but it essentially serves as a macrocosm for a whole continent in crisis right now.
So let's just jump right into the data. The Clooneys purchased their $8.3 million estate Domaine du Canadel in the Brignoles area back in 2021. And the motivation was pretty clear, right? France has notoriously strict paparazzi laws.
Right, yeah. And George Clooney has actually spoken at length about wanting his kids to grow up, out of the Hollywood spotlight, doing chores, living a grounded, sort of disconnected life.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, they even obtained French citizenship for the family in 2025. Like, they were fully invested in this quiet, rural existence.
But then the Brignoles blaze just shatters that peace. It forced the evacuation of, I think, between 600 and 700 people in that area.
And it is worth noting how the Clooneys handled this, actually.
Oh, yeah, the letter.
Right. They wrote this public letter to the Brignoles mayor, Didier Bramond. They stated, at this point, we have no idea whether our beautiful home makes it through this terrible moment, while also pledging to help rebuild the community.
Which is an admirable sentiment, but I mean,
Right.
It really underscores the sheer helplessness of this situation. Because to understand what they were actually up against, I dug into the data from Calamity.live, which aggregates real-time disaster monitoring.
Okay.
The fire near Brignoles triggered a critical severity score, so that's a 62 out of 100. Satellites detected 41 distinct fire pixels, covering about 5.7 square kilometers, which doesn't sound huge, but the metric that genuinely requires a double take is the fire radiative power, the FRP.
Yeah, the FRP was recorded at 981 megawatts, which is just staggering.
I mean, you look at a typical commercial nuclear power plant reactor. It outputs somewhere around 1,000 megawatts of electricity. We were talking about a wildfire radiating the energy equivalent of a massive nuclear reactor.
Just pure uncontained heat.
Right. Just pure destructive heat. Nature really acts as the ultimate equalizer here.
It really does, because that much thermal energy fundamentally alters the physics of the local environment. When a fire reaches nearly a gigawatt of radiant heat, it doesn't just, burn the fuel it touches. It acts like a giant oven.
Wow.
Yeah, the radiant heat pushes forward, basically baking the moisture out of the trees and the underbrush hundreds of yards ahead of the actual flame front.
So it's preparing its own fuel.
Exactly.
Right.
By the time the fire reaches that vegetation, it is bone dry and volatile. It practically explodes upon ignition.
You can build the most secure compound in the world backed by infinite wealth, but you just cannot negotiate with 981 megawatts of heat pre-baking your property.
No, there is no VIP lane for a thermal column of that magnitude. And, if we zoom out from Brignoles, this heat is just one localized hotspot in a much wider catastrophe.
Because Southern Europe is currently just a tinderbox.
Oh, absolutely. With devastating fires tearing through Spain, Greece, Turkey.
So let's follow that heat and travel about 400 miles west from the Clooney estate, over to the Gironde region in southwest France. Because the fires over there are doing something even more terrifying.
Oh, yeah, the Gironde fire.
Right. It burned over 420 square kilometers. For context for you listening, that is an area 4 times the size of Paris. It forced 220,000 people to evacuate. And in the process, it gave birth to a meteorological monster.
France's first ever recorded pyrocumulonimbus cloud.
which sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
A pyro-shib, yeah. These phenomena are fascinating and terrifying because they represent this threshold where a wildfire stops being influenced by the weather and starts actually dictating it.
So the PBS News data we reviewed break this down, but I'd love to look at the actual mechanics here. A 981 megawatt fire acts like a massive engine, right? Wow. Creating this intense updraft of superheated air.
Exactly. That updraft acts like a chimney. And as that incredibly hot air rushes upward, it carries an immense payload of moisture, both from the atmosphere and, crazily enough, from the water physically boiling out of the burning trees.
Wait, really? The trees are sweating out water into the fire?
Yeah. And as this column of air climbs into the upper atmosphere, it hits much colder temperatures.
Okay, so normally water vapor would just condense around microscopic dust particles to form a standard cloud, right?
Right, but here the atmosphere is choked with millions of particles of ash and soot from the fire itself, so the moisture condenses rapidly around that ash.
Ah, I see.
And as the cloud pushes even higher, crossing the freezing line, those water droplets turn into ice crystals. Inside this violent, turbulent updraft, these ice crystals are just crashing into each other at high speeds, stripping away electrons and separating their electrical charges.
Which turns a cloud of ash and water into a fully electrified thunderstorm. A thunderstorm that is sitting directly over a landscape that is already bone dry and burning.
Exactly. The feedback loop is instantaneous and brutal. The cloud begins shooting lightning down onto the unburned, dry ground outside the main fire zone, sparking entirely new blazes.
So firefighters suddenly find themselves completely surrounded.
Yeah, it's a nightmare for containment.
The PBS source also detailed how this creates erratic wind drafts. Because, all that air rushing up in the atmosphere creates a vacuum at the surface, right?
Right. The physics demand equilibrium. So air from the surrounding area rushes in at high speeds to fill that vacuum created by the updraft.
Which fans the flames even more.
Exactly. And simultaneously, the storm cloud creates massive, cold downdrafts that punch violent gusts back to the surface. These sudden, unpredictable wind shifts can split the main fire into multiple fronts or instantly cut off escape routes.
And the extreme atmospheric turbulence even spins up fire whirls, which, imagine a dust devil, but instead of dirt, it is a spinning vortex of flame and immense heat.
It's literally apocalyptic.
But looking at the historical data, Canada produced a record 142 of these pyrocumulonimbus clouds in 2023. If North America and Australia see these regularly, why is the appearance of one in France such a massive shock to the system?
The shock really stems from shifting climatic baselines. Historically, the fuel load and the specific atmospheric conditions required for a pyrocy, intense heat, extreme dryness at the surface, specific moisture aloft, those were incredibly rare in Europe.
But things are changing.
Very fast.
Yeah.
Europe is currently heating at roughly twice the global average since the 1980s.
Wait, twice the global average?
Yeah.
Why is Europe specifically bearing the brunt of this?
So a few converging factors are to blame here. First is Arctic amplification. As the Arctic loses its sea ice, the temperature difference between the North Pole and the equator shrinks. And this weakened temperature gradient causes the jet stream, the high-altitude wind that drives weather patterns, to slow down and meander.
So instead of weather systems moving smoothly across the continent, they just get stuck.
Exactly. The jet stream gets locked into these deep, wavy patterns, trapping high-pressure systems, essentially heat domes, over the Mediterranean for weeks at a time.
Wow.
So the land bakes, the soil moisture evaporates, and the dense European forests cure into just perfect fuel. The conditions that used to be exclusive to the Australian outback or the Canadian wilderness have officially arrived in French wine country.
That is deeply unsettling. But here is where we hit a massive data discrepancy that I really want to unpack.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because while this region is quite literally generating fire-breathing storm clouds, I looked at the Airmine air quality forecast for the Brignoles area during the height of the evacuations. And it listed the air quality index, the AQI, as medium, a 53.4 out of 100. And it listed PM 2.5 levels as good. That feels mathematically impossible. How on earth can the AQI be medium when there is an active gigawatt fire in the exact same district?
I know, on the surface it looks like a complete failure of the reporting system. But to decode this, we really have to look at the intersection of local geography and technological limitations.
Okay, let's start with geography.
So the Brignoles area is heavily influenced by the Mistral winds.
The Mistral, that's a cold, dry wind that blows down from the north, right?
Yeah, it is a phenomenal meteorological engine. When a high-pressure system sits over the Bay of Biscay and a low-pressure system sits over the Gulf of Genoa, it creates this steep, pressure gradient.
So it pulls the air down.
Right. The cold air gets sucked southward, funneling aggressively down the Rhone River Valley. This wind accelerates as it hits the coast, acting as a massive natural fan that ventilates southern France, basically pushing a significant portion of the smoke out over the Mediterranean Sea.
Okay, a localized wind pushing smoke away explains a temporary dip in visible smog. Sure, but I have to push back here. It absolutely does not explain a good rating for PM2.5.
No, it doesn't.
Because PM2.5 refers to fine particulate matter, particles that are 2.5 microns or smaller. If you breathe that in, it's so small it bypasses the body's natural defenses in the nose and throat, goes deep into the lungs, and can cross directly through the alveolar wall into your bloodstream.
Exactly. The biological impact is severe. Once in the circulatory system, PM2.5 causes systemic inflammation. It aggravates asthma, triggers heart attacks, and can even cross the blood-brain barrier.
Right, so when an app tells you that PM2.5 is good, the stakes for your physical health are incredibly high. The real reason for this discrepancy isn't just the wind, it's a massive technological blind spot in the Copernicus Atmosphere Monitoring Service, or CAMS.
Yeah, CAMS is the data engine powering apps like AirMine. And it's a brilliant piece of European Union technology, but it's heavily reliant on satellite observations to measure the density of particles in the atmosphere.
Wait, if CAMS relies on satellite data, there has to be a rendering delay, right? They cannot possibly process millions of data points on atmospheric particle density in real time.
That is the crucial flaw right there. During rapidly evolving wildfire events, CAM operates with a 1 to 2 day lag.
A 2-day lag.
Yeah. The satellites capture the imagery, but integrating that massive sudden spike in wildfire emissions into the complex predictive models takes time.
It is exactly like playing a high-stakes video game on a terrible internet connection. Like, the reality on the ground has already changed, the enemy's right in front of you, but your screen just hasn't updated yet.
That's a perfect analogy. The algorithm is using yesterday's atmospheric data to predict the air quality of a fire that doubled in size this morning. So the forecast will temporarily but severely underestimate the presence of dangerous pollutants.
That's terrifying. If you rely on your phone's weather app to tell you if it's safe to go for a run, or if you should tape your windows shut during an evacuation, you need to understand this lag. Relying solely on automated tech during a rapidly unfolding natural disaster is incredibly perilous.
Totally.
The physical world is moving at the speed of a 981 megawatt fire. The data processing is moving at the speed of satellite rendering.
And we build these advanced systems to feel safe and informed, right? But a 1-day delay in data processing can literally be the difference between evacuating safely and suffering severe respiratory damage.
We are seeing this technological failure compound the physical danger. And if we shift back geographically to the Gironde region, back to the heart of Bordeaux, we see the danger compounding economically as well.
Yes, the economic fallout is huge.
The sources provided an interview with Patrick Seguin, the president of the Regional Chamber of Commerce. He basically called the situation an economic apocalypse.
He also described the fires as a stab in the back to the local economy. And to understand that level of despair, we have to look at the precarious state of the Bordeaux wine industry before a single acre burned.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that collapse. Edouard Legrix de la Salle, a winemaker at the Grand Verduz estate, pointed out that the industry was already suffocating. And a major driver is just changing demographics.
Right. Younger generations simply are not drinking wine at the same volume as their parents.
Which is a huge shift.
The cultural shift is stark. We're seeing a massive pivot toward craft beers, artisanal spirits, and a broader health-conscious trend toward non-alcoholic alternatives. The domestic base in France is shrinking rapidly.
And compounding that loss of domestic interest are the international tariffs. The sources explicitly noted the tariffs imposed under the Trump administration in the U.S., which placed heavy burdens on French wine exports. And the mechanics of those tariffs are brutal for the producers. Because of the 3-tier alcohol distribution system in the U.S., a 25% tariff often means the French producer has to absorb the cost to keep the bottle's shelf price competitive for the American consumer.
Because if they pass the cost on, the consumer just buys a cheaper bottle from California or Chile. So the French vineyards eat the tariff, and their profit margins effectively vanish.
Right.
Add to that the widespread inflation increasing the cost of glass, corks, and transport, and you have an industry operating on the razor's edge of bankruptcy.
The wine industry essentially turned into a monoculture crop. They were relying almost entirely on one single lifeline to survive: tourism.
Yeah, wine tourism was really the only dynamic growing sector left for them. The region is internationally famous for its historic chateau, its curated tasting experiences, the nearby Arcachon Bay.
But when a 420 square kilometer fire breaks out, that lifeline is severed instantly. The government actively broadcasted appeals for people to avoid the Gironde region entirely.
And Edouard Legrix de la Salle expressed shock at the government's warning, given how vital tourism is. But, I mean, from a public safety standpoint, officials cannot have thousands of foreign tourists who are totally unfamiliar with the roads driving into a region where a pyrocumulonimbus cloud might suddenly trap them in a fire whirl.
No, of course not. But the irony is incredibly grim. You have people from all over the world flocking to the French Riviera or Bordeaux for this idyllic, sun-drenched, carefree escape, which is exactly what George and Amal Clooney were looking for, by the way.
Right, exactly.
And instead, they find themselves trapped under apocalyptic skies, checking weather apps that are 2 days behind reality.
And the economic ripple effect of severing that tourism lifeline is massive. The Chamber of Commerce reported that 39,000 businesses have been affected in the region. We are seeing a 37% increase in business liquidations in the commercial courts of Bordeaux and Libourne compared to last year.
39,000 businesses. I mean, that extends far beyond the wealthy vineyard owners. That is the local baker, the boutique hotel operator, the tour guide, the restaurant staff.
Everyone.
When the anchor industry fails, the entire ecosystem crashes with it.
And I think this illustrates a vital lesson about extreme climate events. They do not happen in a vacuum. A wildfire doesn't just burn trees. It acts as a massive accelerant to the collapse of economic systems that are already teetering on the brink.
We have traced a remarkable path today. We started with a Hollywood power couple fleeing an exclusive multi-million-dollar farmhouse. We unpacked the terrifying atmospheric physics of fire-breathing storm clouds and the shifting jet streams that brought them to Europe.
Yeah, a lot of ground covered.
We examined how our most advanced satellite data can give us a false sense of security, putting human health at real risk. And finally, we witnessed how these fires are threatening to dismantle a historic, centuries-old wine economy.
It really emphasizes the profound interconnectedness of these systems, you know? The climate, our technology, our economy, and our personal safety are all inextricably woven together. A failure in one domain triggers immediate cascading failures in all the others.
And this brings us to a reality that you, listening to this, really need to confront.
Yeah.
Extreme events like these are no longer isolated incidents happening somewhere else to someone else.
Right.
They are interconnected catastrophes that are fundamentally altering everyday life, disrupting supply chains, and reshaping the map of the world.
We are entering an era where the baseline of what we consider normal weather is just being rewritten in real time.
So I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder.
Yeah.
If centuries-old European wine regions, places renowned globally as safe idyllic havens for the world's elite to escape the chaos of modern life, are suddenly becoming the epicenters of violent new weather phenomena, how will this reshape the global map of where we choose to live, invest, and travel in the decades to come? If the sky over that perfect 18th century French farmhouse can turn orange, pre-baked by a gigawatt of radiant heat, and force you to run for your life, where does the ultimate safe haven actually exist when the climate rewrites all the rules? Will there even be such a thing as a climate refuge? Or will we all just have to adapt to the fire? Something to think about. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.